Welcome to the Brute Strength Podcast, bringing you worldwide experts from all areas of health and fitness. We cover training, nutrition, coaching, and mindset. Welcome your host, strength and conditioning coach, 2012 and 2013 CrossFit Games champ, Michael Cazayoux. Mind, body, brute.
Hey, before we start this show, I want to let you know about something I'm super pumped about right now, which is that I started a second podcast. It's called the WAG Podcast, and I do it with my wife, Adi Cazayoux. And the reason that we started this second show is because over the past few years, I've had the opportunity to interview some of the best and brightest in the health and fitness space, from New York Times bestselling authors to Olympians and CrossFit Games athletes to NFL coaches to sports psychologists, you name it, a lot of the best and the brightest. And I have also interviewed my wife, Adi, 6 or 7 times. And without fail, the episodes that get the most engagement in terms of direct messages or mentions on social media or emails are all the ones that I do with her. And I think it has something to do with the authenticity of the conversations, the fact that we know each other a little bit better and can pull stories out of the other. And so we decided that we were going to start a second show, and the format is each episode is 20 to 30 minutes on a single topic with actionable steps after each. We talk about nutrition, personal development, mindset, and fitness. And so far, the response has been incredible. So if you're interested in the conversations that we've had on this show, I know you will love that one. So go check it out. Let me know what you think. Let's get into this episode. Hey, and welcome back. This is Michael Cazayoux, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. This week, I've got Kelly Starrett back on the show. Kelly is best known for being the creator of the mobility wad. He's the guy that introduced the world to using lacrosse balls and bands, amongst a lot of other tools, to do self-mobilization techniques, kind of putting us in the driver's seat of our own mobility, which was, I think, the first time that was really done on a massive scale. He's since written the books Becoming a Supple Leopard, Desk Bound, amongst a few others. And today, because Adi and I are thinking so seriously about having kids soon, and I often use this kind of as a way to, this podcast as a way to scratch my own itch, we start talking about raising kids, because I know he is very intentional. He and his wife, Juliet, are very intentional about how they raise their kids. And like everything else in life, they're trying to be the absolute best that they can at it. And so we started talking about kids. I asked him some things about like what are the things that he's most proud of when he sees his kids doing X, Y, or Z. What are the things that make him the most proud? We talk about raising kids to be good citizens, to value movement, and to value the process, such as practice in a sport. We talk about the concept of treating your movement and your life as an infinite game rather than a finite game. I'll let you listen to get more details on that. Then we start talking about movement. And first, I asked Kelly whether or not he's in pain. For someone that is such an advocate of mobilizing and recovery techniques, I was just really curious whether or not he was in pain, and how he treats his own training and recovery. So we talk about that. Then we talk about what common habits and technologies he's worried about. And then on the flip side, what movements he's really excited about, such as more and more people using stand-up desks. If you haven't heard of this guy already, you must have been living under a rock somewhere. If you have, you know that he is one of the foremost thought leaders in the strength and conditioning world, but especially in physical therapy, movement, and just health in general. And every time I get together with this guy, we just have a fascinating conversation, and it usually ranges far outside of movement and exercise science, and this one was no different. So without further ado, please help me welcome Kelly Starrett. I'm stoked to be back here with you again. The first episode we did was fascinating for me, and I know you've gone through a ton of changes in your business recently, and you're launching the Ready State in, I think you said a couple of days?
Yeah.
A couple of days?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let you know if I'm still alive. And
Yeah.
if you're not seeing it, it's a burning ember of our whole life and relationships.
I love it, dude. So it's August 28th, August 30th. By the time this comes out, y'all will be rocking and rolling. But I'm just really eager to see what's changed, what you've been learning, and we'll see where it goes, man. I came across this quote in an interview that you did recently where you were talking about treating your movement like an infinite game. Can you talk about this a little bit and what impact you think that might have on people if they thought this way?
Yeah, I appreciate that resonated with you because so many of us look like I'm beyond the age. Like I love to train, I love to compete, but come on, I'm 40. I'm almost 46. I have my priorities are different, right? And what I realize is the engine's never gonna get as hot as it once did. I'm never gonna have the tissue tolerance to be able to handle the volume or be able to dedicate twice a day, 300 days a year to what I want to do. And that's okay. So the idea here though is if I view that as one or zero, then I'm always going to be in some kind of mindset where I fail or I
Mm-hmm.
didn't win. And at some point, your relationships, your business, your own training, you have to have. I mean, this could be in the terms viewed in terms of frame set of growth mindset, but viewing things as open process. And this reference that you're making is from this book called Finite and Infinite Games, where it's not about how to apply game theory to your life. I mean, shoot me in the face. That sounds tough. Like winning a badge because I eat vegetables. This doesn't resonate with me. But what does is the fact that if you're playing an infinite game, you don't know what the rules are. You don't know what the start and finish is. And all you can do is try to play better. That's how you win the game. And you keep everyone else in play. And when I made that switch around our business, I stopped feeling so crazy all the time, because I was like, you can't win business. You just you go through phases where you're playing great and you go through training where you're like, man, I'm killing it. I'm making good progress. I've been super consistent. And then you jump on a red eye to the East Coast, or
Right.
someone gets sick or you sprain your ankle or something happens where you just can't, you're not playing so well, or something happens where you can't play as well as you'd like. And that notion, I think we come out of a really finite game mentality, especially culturally here in the US, where it feels like about winning and losing, and we frame things in those terms. And if I don't PR every single day, I've lost, and it doesn't feel good. And I think even if you can imagine, if you're listening to this and you make a big list of things you want to get done in the day, right? The goal isn't to clear that list and start again. I mean, you'll just, that just feels terrible. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like, the task of Sisyphus, we're just adding complexity to people's lives. And the notion is, hey, this has been the most profound thing for me of late is that, look, I eat pretty well as a human being. I'm savvy. I get blood draws. I'm under 10% body fat. You can see some abs. I mean, it's fine. I still enjoy cookies, right? I'm not militant, and I don't have to eat a specific way necessarily for a body composition goal, which is hard for those people who do. And I don't, I look good enough with my shirt off as a middle-aged man that I still respect myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I realize, for example, that it's easy for me sometimes to slip into patterns where I do not eat enough vegetables and fruits. I just don't,
Mm-hmm.
I just get behind and I grab a shake here and I eat the eggs and with grass-fed butter and I'm killing it. Meanwhile, I haven't had any vegetables or eggs or fruits. So, one of my friends, E.C. Sinkowski, is Optimize Me Nutrition, and she has this 800-gram challenge. And I saw that and I was like, wow, 800 grams of fruits and vegetables. And I wonder if I can do that. And what I love about this game is that you don't win a prize if you eat 800 grams of fruits and vegetables, but I feel better and I'm full all the time. And I'm always like, oh my God, I have to eat more to hit this goal.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day, it resets. And all I can do is I haven't won the game. It goes away. All I can do is continue to try to look around and be more curious about the way I'm eating and bring consciousness. And I think that's the general framework of this infinite game concept, is that when you start to view these aspects of your life, the quality of your relationships, how much sleep you're getting, and you stop kind of framing them in one or zero, I fail or I didn't, is, I'm going to play as well as I can play. And if you're a busy person or you're in the military or, you have some deadlines, you're an attorney, I guarantee you there's going to be times in your life where you're not sleeping. In fact, you can't sleep.
Mm-hmm.
God forbid you ever have an infant baby in your house, and you're just not going to sleep then. So what do? Are you a failure? Because you lost the sleep game because your sleep tracking identity ring, which is telling you how to feel, tells you that you didn't get enough sleep. So all you can say is, well, I had the opportunity to sleep for 5 hours and I slept for 5 hours. I played the best game that was available to me. So it's sort of a mindset around solving complex problems and living with complexity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've learned this in a really impactful way recently around business. I think for my entire career, I've just been in a state of trying to do things as quickly as possible for no real reason, right? I would try to get things done as fast as humanly possible, even if they had no deadlines. And what I learned is that there's no race, right? Unless there's a race, it's not a race. And I can actually enjoy my work so much more. And I also get more done in less time when I think of it as when I stop putting so much pressure on myself to move quickly. I start thinking. I start thinking more clearly, I think is what it is. And so I become so much more productive. I enjoy what I'm doing more. And I think people can apply that same thought process to a lot of different things in life.
I think you may be right about that. And, I think what it smells like is, man, do you like the process? Are you enjoying process? Are you enjoying the work?
Mm-hmm.
We talked to a lot of I had handful of interns, and, some of them are going to physio school. Some of them are, in a collegiate strength and conditioning program. And, I'm just like, hey, we're always so oriented, and it's important. Of course, you should goal set. Of course, you should have aspirational ideas. But I said, man, you really better like the day to day on this. Like, if you better be excited about getting up and teaching squatting and liking being in the gym, and you really got to have to work at resolving that dissonance if it's not there. And one of the things that I feel like, wow, I'm playing good at this moment is my 14-year-old has started high school. She's playing water polo and she loves practice. And she loves competing and she loves the games. That's her favorite part, but she loves practice. And for me, I'm like, wow, I have a kid who likes to play practice. Like, she likes going to practice. She likes competing during practice. And I'm like, that's the thing. Like, if you don't really like practice, then you're not going to enjoy that. It's not going to be as rich. And I think, to your point, it is difficult to realize, and I think this is my epiphany of late, that the glacial pace is the breakneck pace. Mm-hmm. That is as fast as we can go to make change, to develop capacities, to change behaviors, to move society along. It has kind of a top speed.
I love that, man. So I often use this podcast as just a way to scratch my own itch. And as we were talking about before the podcast, Adi and I are starting to think really, really deeply about having kids soon. And so I want to learn as much as I can from you about raising kids. How do you teach people to love the process, whether it be kids or your students or athletes or whatever?
Well, step one, marry Juliet Starrett. That's all you need to do. Like you. Step two, I don't know if there's not a Juliet Starrett around. Well, it's interesting. Juliet and I are both children of divorce, and I think that really shaped us in ways that were not necessarily healthy, but potentially made us successful people. Do you know what I mean? Like like Juliet is a workhorse, and I think she adopted this affect of and practice of being a perfectionist, right? And outworking everyone. And if you look at her and going to Cal and being a lawyer and a 3-time world champion, and she's a savage CEO. And I developed some strategies around dissociation. Like, I'm like super stressed. Let me turn off my feelings and I'll just take a nap now, and I can just dissociate, which made me a really excellent Class 5 kayaker and a really good competitor, because no matter how stressed I was, I'd be like, now it's time to turn on and do the job,
Right.
But those are not long-term great skills. And, Juliet and I had a goal, first of all, is like, hey, let's try to stay married so that our kids
Right.
don't have to be children of divorce.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think everyone should be married all the time. It doesn't always work. It's not always good. But for us, one of the things that we wanted for our kids um, was to really have them grow up in some stability. So they didn't, we were talking to one of our friends, and he had an old sage buddy, and the buddy was saying to him, like, look, you don't need to put adversity in front of your kids. They'll find it. And Juliet and I were like, check. Let's not get divorced so that our kids have to overcome that. There's plenty of things in the world. And, what that leads me to, first and foremost, around sort of what's working for us, because every family has to sort it out. And I would say that Juliet and I didn't necessarily, we each had one great parent, and which is amazing because some people don't have any great parents. And the idea, though, first and foremost, is, of course, now that I'm an adult and I can look back and I'm like, okay, my parents, my mom did as well as she could, right? And she killed it. She was a single working mama, whatever. But what I'll tell you is, first and foremost, that Juliet is the top priority, not my kids. And that like one of the things that really profoundly made our lives better was when we sat down once a week, scheduled it. And on Wednesdays, like, I'm going to hang up here, and then we're going to go on what's called the feelings meeting, which I have talked about before, where we sit down and it's like you get to air the grievances. I mean, you get to talk about the relationship, what's working. You can't be defensive. Sometimes you need a drink in front of you. Sometimes, you got to take a big breath and say, you really pissed me off, or that really hurt. And getting comfortable with that process of infinite game, that you're not going to win marriage, that you're going to, that you're going to only play better. And I'll tell you, this last year, and I have Juliet's permission to talk about this, is, we were like rolling into 2019, like, we're going to kill this year. And then Juliet was diagnosed with breast cancer in December.
Wow.
And so we had what we call Cancer Christmas. And, Juliet had a double mastectomy, reconstruction surgery. We decided, hey, we should probably maybe put the relaunch of our business off a couple months, because this is, we were stressed animals because,
I can't imagine, man.
And we dodged a lot of the big bullets. I mean, Juliet she did not need chemo, did not need radiation, but there's a lot tied up in there. And I'll tell you, I mean, I think it's a testament to the fact that we had a lot of good communication, and we were highly aligned, that we were pressure tested in that moment with running two businesses and having about 40 employees and 2 kids. And, there's a lot going on. And I still think my wife is rad, and we still like each other, and we're still broing out. So, as you're going towards that, I think a lot of times there's this concept called metastability, which is systems seem robust and they seem stable, but then it's sort of a shell game. And if you just flick that thing once, you get one bad night's sleep and boom, you get a cold. I'm like, dude, you weren't very robust. You should be able to handle one bad night's sleep, right? But you get one bad night's sleep, you get a cold, or you can't. The system of metastability is like you have an avalanche ready to happen. The system looks stable, then there's a triggering event and you get an avalanche, right? And then once the avalanche has slid, then you have a stable system again. And I think there's a lot of relationships that are like that, and then all of a sudden you bring a child into that, and man, I tell you, we discovered this thing like we called the 3 a.m. voice. Like, you want to find out who you really are and how enlightened you are.
Yes.
Like at 3 a.m. when your baby needs to be fed, like, who you are in that moment is really who you are in the world, even if you have to fake it.
Wow.
Why, yes, hon, I would love to get up. Can I get you something while I'm changing this diaper?
Yeah.
Hey, babe, is that the kid crying? Yes, it is. And the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And I'll tell you, I have come further and further to believe that our strength and conditioning, our physical practice, which is really what it is, a modern physical practice, is the way out of a lot of societal ills. In terms of look at the coaches. In physical therapy right now, it's very in vogue to talk about the biopsychosocial nature of human beings and pain, right? That you're not just an engine and levers and pulleys. Like, you're a complex psycho-emotional person who feels stress and worry, and and you've got to you got to sleep, and you've got to think about like, I'm like, you mean coaching? Because if you've ever worked with athletes or been in an environment where people don't sleep, don't eat, don't feel supported, don't feel safe, aren't feel like they're cheered for and valued for, you get crap performance out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are again talking about sort of growth mindset. And boy, if you are engaged in a physical practice and a strength conditioning program that lasts for decades, where you're on you don't win. Larry Wheels isn't strong enough for him. He's still practicing, he's still getting better. And I think this notion that, you ever arrive, you just don't arrive. You just run out of time, and that when you run out of time, it's death. And for us, I mean, do you ever see a day where you're not going to be in the gym training? Nope. You ever see a day where you're not going to be competing? Well, it'll be different, but
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm going to be that old guy lining up at the start line.
Mm-hmm.
And so really everything that I feel like that I understand, I really have come to understand through the lens of physical practice, being a member of a community, dropping my political association when I walk into the gym, really seeing people in their most vulnerable, exposed selves, like a place where people can come in and, like, maybe it's that we say at our gym, it's the only time where people get any unconditional positive regard in the day.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's beautiful. First off, bring it back to the analogy of ships in a storm. I'm so sorry to hear what you guys have gone through, but it sounds like y'all are as stable as they come, and you're treating each other with compassion, and like you're a team, and you're moving through it with as much grace as is possible.
Well, it definitely, again, let me just say, it helps to be married to my wife, who's an incredible human, it's a lift. I mean, that's a poor analogy, or you get some you got to be able to say, wow, I really messed that up,
Mm-hmm.
and, we have these little moments. We have a sauna in our backyard. We've had one for a couple of years, a barrel sauna,
Mm-hmm.
because of, getting involved with Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese. And that sauna for us has saved our life, because we have to go into a really hot place, and there's close proximity. It's dim, there's no distraction, and you have to interact in that place.
Mm-hmm.
And that has become a built-in sort of reset for us over and over again. And it's a place where my wife can be like, dude, you messed that up.
Right.
And I know you can do better. And I'm gonna be like, you got it. I can do better. And man, no one likes to grow. I think that's an ugly process, but hopefully we have some meta awareness, some self-awareness, in the same self-awareness if you can show up at a gym, for example, and get coached by someone and really take their feedback, listen, feel it for yourself, be in a dialogue, right? A coaching dialogue, then why are you doing something different with your spouse or your partner or your boyfriend, your girlfriend, or your business partner? I mean, it's messy work being a human being. It's stinking messy. And I think that's one of the reasons we've changed the name from Mobility WOD to Ready State. And it's like, well, how ready can we get you based on the fact that you're a messy, complex, sophisticated, nuanced animal who has a lot going on in their lives. Like, you can't have the perfect turmeric and eat the perfect breakfast and do the dynamic warm up and, and get the massage. It just doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's control what we can control. And then let's be open to the fact that there's probably a better way, and that we'll all seek that better way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also really appreciate what you're talking about, these rituals that you guys have. Adi and I have talked a lot about this, but this is one of the, pillars of our relationship. We have either walks or kind of ritual nights where we're doing exactly what you're talking about. It's just a safe space to bring up uncomfortable things or anything vulnerable, and it is just enormous for relationships.
I really like the term ritual. I should adopt that more. Sometimes that could feel loaded, but if you're in the habit, right? Like I really appreciate like Jocko Willink. Jocko is this incredible leader, and his whole thing is discipline equals freedom. And I'm like, let's substitute the word discipline for the word habit.
Mm-hmm.
That if you can engage in like, well, this is what we do on Tuesdays, we go for this walk, then you don't have to like create an opportunity and get over the psycho, resistance, to being able to have the talk, because every Tuesday you're having this talk and you're falling into a pattern where the system takes care of you because you have the discipline to create a habit around a behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the magic. For me, one of the biggest things is, man, I love cookies. I'll go for the cookie. And my personal rule is no sweets, no cookies, no snacks before 8 p.m., which is, I know most people are like, what? I want to eat cookies after. But if I get through the whole day and I've eaten dinner and I still want a cookie and it's after 8, I have it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't have cookies in the house, there's no cookies to be eaten. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I'm like, I'm tricky, that Dr. Kelly Starrett. I just don't buy cookies. And then 8 p.m. comes around and I'm like, I love a cookie, but there's no cookies. So the behavior takes care of itself. And, and this is really known as blocked, or more importantly, it's constrained behavior. So when we create patterns and systems, then you automatically do the right thing and you don't have to think about it or waste energy about it. And I think the more we can kind of think about that as psychological beings, as tribal beings, like, for example, at our gym, every single class, everyone shakes hands at the beginning of class, no matter what. And part of that is the rituals. This is our buy-in, this is how we all greet each other. And I have athletes who've been with me 12 years, 13 years, 14 years, and we still shake hands at the beginning of class. And these people have trained together literally 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not hyperbole. They've trained together 1,000 times, right? And think about how many sessions they've done over, 12 or 13 years. And they still shake hands. And so, but that creates a space where everyone's invited. Everyone gets to shug off, be seen. And that's one less thing that I have to manage as a coach in terms of trying to get people to feel like they're in a community and feel supported, feel seen, because we just automatically shake hands at the beginning of class.
Oh, that's great, man. What are some of the other things that you're really proud of in your kids? One of them being your daughter loves practicing. Are there any other things that you're really proud of?
Yeah, it's amazing. People who don't have kids listen to this are going to be like, this is so dumb. Do you remember Inside the Actor's Studio?
And I know the name. I've never seen it.
He would always say, like, he'd ask this kind of series of questions by this famous interviewer, Bernard Pivot. And I'm talking about the Will Ferrell, I'm talking about the real thing. And he would always say, what noise or sound do you love? And then people would be like, the sound of my children laughing. Yeah. And I'd be like, oh my God, yeah, right. And now I'm like, oh, the sound of one child making the other child laugh. Look, I think, there's been a lot of talk around privilege of late, which is really good. And, one of the things that, Juliet and I feel very strongly about is, trying to advocate for coaches and people who are just, don't have the voice. And something I'm very proud about in our CrossFit community is we have, I think, some of the most women coaches and head coaches in any strength conditioning system in the world, right? There are just more badass women who are coaching and programming and leading than you can see in the college scenes, even at the professional scenes. And, one of the things that sort of harks back to is, I remember being in college, and I'll get back to the question in a second. I remember being in college, it was a freshman year, and I went to this meeting that one of my professors was putting on about being a better ally to, communities that need it, right? To underserved communities. And this lecture put up 30 different positions of privilege, right? Parents were college educated, tall, Protestant, blonde hair, like check, white, male. And she was like, look, no one person in here is all 30 of these things. And I was like, actually, I'm 100% privileged. And wow. I was like, clear across the board. And what I'll tell you is that we talk a lot about our kids, about their privilege. And we live in Northern California, in Marin County. And it is so easy to be like, we're so enlightened. And, but what I expect of my children it's what I expect of my athletes and friends and business relationships, like that they look around and improve the ball, that they use their considerable talents and privilege to make their own communities better. So, for example, sometimes we have one of our silly routines at dinner is like, what was the highlight of your day and what would you do over again? And it's just a routine that, a thing that we do to talk about our days and to have a little self-respection, introspection about, God, I'd love to have that moment again. And, and sometimes that conversation is, well, what'd you do for your community today? Like, how did you improve the people around you? And it can be a small detail, it could be a courtesy thing, it could be a big thing, but, we've got to do a better job of making care of our community our top priority. And I think it's Talib who says, like at a local level, he behaves a certain way, and at a state level, he thinks a different way, and at a government level, big government level.
I think it goes on the national level, he's a libertarian, and
right.
It goes all the way down to in the family level, he's a socialist.
That's right. I really appreciate that, because Juliet and I have come to believe that, well, I can't, like, what we can do is really impact our community. And that means our neighborhood first, then our community second. And so when we get to thinking about service and friendship and just being, what does it mean to be a citizen, not at this national level, but at a really gritty level, like, taking your neighbor's trash cans or picking up trash on the way to school, like just something, what I'm really proud about then is that my kids believe that it's up to them to improve the ball. And I love that term from volleyball. If you touch the ball, you better improve the ball, leave the ball in a better position than you got it. Right. Like, I think that's an old idea, and the black, the All Blacks talk about it, improve the jersey. And, but what does that look like as a day-to-day practice? Because we all, you get to vote every 4 years and but like, what does that look like in a microcosm at a small level? And for me, that's the gym level. That's, giving people unconditional positive regard. That's, seeing people and holding the door or letting someone go. And, how do you think at that level? And I think what takes a minute for that consciousness to set in, that it's up to you, and all you have to do is improve your neighborhood level, your street level first. And if we had everyone doing that, then the system works at that level. And my kids are doing a good job of being, a parent will come to me once in a while and be like, your kid sat with my child when they were all alone at lunch. And I'm like, yeah, they damn right better, because that's the right thing to do, and it shouldn't be amazing. To wrap that up, or to tie that put a ball on that thing, I like that my kids are situationally aware, because they have every privilege, and their mom is Juliet Starrett, like CEO, world champion, badass. And, they have access, the aunts and uncles that my kids have are ridiculous, and they have extraordinary people and models that if they don't sort of end up being super citizens, I'm not talking about successful as athletes or entrepreneurs or whatever, but just super citizens, then I think Julia and I have really failed.
Is there anything that they do or that you guys do with them that is really outside the norm, or other parents think is crazy?
Oh yeah, dude. Julia and I are those parents, right? We started a walking school bus. We had a walking school bus for about 8 years at our, where we just walk. We force our kids to walk to school. One of the things I think is, we're the house of no. We have really strict boundaries, and we want all the kids over, but we really, we have clear. Our kids know where the boundaries are, and it's okay to say no, that's not okay, but I'll tell you the thing that really we have worked hard on, that I think people are sometimes shocked, is that we try to travel a lot with our kids, and that means that really raises empathy and makes them have the grit to deal with all the new situations, right? Because you're in the new airport and you're taking this sketchy bus ride in Africa, and like, you got to deal. You're sleeping in a weird place and, and eating strange foods and you got to get comfortable with that. And then simultaneously, so we travel a lot. And I think sometimes a lot of people don't have the same opportunity. And that's one of our privileges. But one of the things that is pretty democratized, and I'll put it in quotation marks because it's definitely not even, is that we spend a lot of time in the woods with our kids. So wilderness is a value we have around our connection to our community and our connection to our environment. But also, it just solves a lot of silly BS around tech. And our kids are nice kids. They're their nicest selves and best selves when we come back from a 5-day river trip,
Right.
or we've gone on an overnight backpacking trip or something. Just having to sort of be an animal in the environment seems to be a way of keeping my kids. My greatest fear is that I'm going to have these little, privileged white girls from Marin. Like I think that's a fear we live with, Even Georgia used the other day, she's like, oh, that girl is so basic. I mean, she just had like the right water bottle. She had the right, I was like, whoa, she's a product of the system, check your privilege, bro.
Yeah.
And, and it's hard. But if my daughter's becoming aware of the way she is in the world, that's all you can ask for.
Oh, that's great, man. Yeah, I'm the nicest after a good backpacking trip as well. So I love that you're doing that with your kids so intentionally.
But I don't think it's optional. And or maybe, it's what helped Juliet and I, be able to take risks as entrepreneurs. We were both young river guides and in charge. I remember that time when you were 20 years old and you were in charge of getting 60 people down this Class 5 river. Remember that? No. I can't believe anyone gave me that job, and making people feel comfortable and getting their wetsuits on and teaching them how to technique and, they gave me the keys to the castle back then. And I think that made Juliet and I feel really comfortable with risk and really more comfortable with uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. A lot of people talk about, or there's this debate about when the right time to have a kid is. So on one hand, I'll use myself as an example. On one hand, I still want to be young and playful with my kids as they're growing up. And then on the other, I want to continue playing and, building businesses and doing all of the things that I think will be at least a little more challenging once kids come. What's your thoughts and your experience been like in relation to this?
Well, I really appreciate that. What I'll say is, have you ever been to a world championship? Like, it's not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're in a weird hotel, the strange food, the pressures, the travels, jet lag. Like, you're going to need to perform no matter what. So that's shorthand for there's never perfect time for that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I suspect that. What we always need to be making sure is that you have the bandwidth. One of the things that I think is really unfair, and that's something that I think applies to all working women, is this sort of duality of like, Juliet is the brain and CEO of the family, and I often describe myself as the broken anchor of the family, just keeping us down, and I'm holding us back. She is, on track to be partner CEO, as partner of her law firm, super brain, and all of a sudden has kids. And how does that fit in? How does she reconcile her world champion self, who's also, businesswoman brain, with wanting to be at home with her kids?
Mm-hmm.
And how is she going to win that game? She's not, right? And I think one of the interesting things right now is that I think the internet confuses us around what is real health and wellness, right? And if you look at some of the women, let me give a shout out to Kara Saunders Webb, who is, one of our elite best CrossFitters, who took a year off from competing, maybe longer, to have a baby,
Mm-hmm.
and then be transparent about that process and to engage her community with that process and not feel like, she was going to miss her window forever,
Right.
and, Ben Smith, who just, got the wild card for the CrossFit Games, had a baby. And then like 6 weeks later was at the games,
Mm-hmm.
And dude, he's a superhuman anyway, but also having a baby, there's no good time is what I'm saying. Right.
Right.
When here's what it is. When you either are 18 and you're part of a big family living in a commune, that's probably a good time to have a baby, right? It's a young person's game. You have 15 uncles and aunts and 7 co-wives. That's probably a good time to have a baby. Or you're already a billionaire, and that's a good time to have a baby. So in the middle of those two extremes of being a billionaire or living in some kind of, alternative family model where you have all the help in the world and the need, is the rest of us, which is, how am I going to reconcile all these things? And I think this is really timely because, if you're going to build a business, can you also have a family? It's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to be an elite athlete, can you also have a family? I think that's a good question. And, even until recently with, the changes, Nike even all these years was handling pregnancy as an injury. And basically women would lose their contracts and if they couldn't compete, that'd be written off. So there was real disincentive for them to get pregnant. So we have been stacking the deck against understanding that actually families are sources of power. And having kids potentially makes you a more ruthless competitor. And let me give you an example. Carrie Walsh, I think, has 3 kids. Like, I don't know how many gold medals she has, but all of them was the answer to that. And she started a incredible alternative volleyball league called 1440. And she's married to a stud human being and has a whole bunch of kids. And she still happens to be at the top of her game almost at 40 years old. And my point is, I think when we expand this definition of success and body image and all those things, then it's more inclusive. And then those people who want to have kids, you'll make it work, I promise. But you're probably, the engine's probably not going to get as hot as it did for a spell when you're not sleeping, and you're going to have to figure that out. And that's okay, because it's what I can tell you is that it's worth it. And when you're digging down next to that athlete and you're competing head to head and you look over and see your kid in the stands, that other person has no chance.
Yeah. That's great, man. One of the things that I think I'm observing in parents that's really attractive to me is it seems like it allows people to focus on what matters a lot more. Maybe they're more fulfilled or something like that, but they seem to have their priorities a little bit straighter and they're a little less scattered than the average person. And for someone that likes to have his hands in a million different projects at once, I see how that could be the case, and that's really, really attractive to me. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because I think that is what ultimately makes people ultra successful, right? Learning to say no to pretty much everything other than a couple
right.
priorities.
Your kids have constrained you or blocked your behavior.
Yeah.
It's interesting, if you ask Juliet and I what our ideal employee is, if we're like, oh, someone who's been training for a long time, it's probably a working mother, and we're good. So someone who likes to train and who is already a working mother, because that person can manage their time. And if they have 10 hours to do a task, they'll do it in an hour because they only have an hour to do a task. Right. I think to your point, it does help focus, because you're like, I've got to get home and I can't spend 3 hours at the gym. So I'm going to make my density work. Your efficiency goes through the roof, or it certainly can, and because it really forces you to focus. And I think that's really an important idea. I think one of the things that happens in modern training environments is that, and we've seen this with running, we've seen this with swimming, we've seen this with triathlon, we saw it with CrossFit, we see it with, barbell work. Because you can do more work, you do a lot more work, and that people get into this volume concept that more is always better. And what we do know is that, hey, the allegory around like sleep, like it'd be great if you got 8 hours of sleep, but I'll take 6 hours of really dense, high quality sleep. So we always try to focus on quality over quantity. Right. And that could be around food, that could be around sleep, that could be around interactions, the number of times you touch an email, whatever it is. But, when your kids are home, man, it's time. And there's nothing like getting out of your head, because, you got to pick your kid up. And so you better, that you're going to run out of time in the day. And I think that is to your point, I think that's really enlightened that a lot of the best athletes I still know all have kids, you know, and they learn to work smarter instead of, well, I've got the whole day, so I'll spend 3 hours doing these 5 back squat sets.
Right.
You know, in,
Shit.
out, done. Let's get on with it, people.
Yeah. I'm in, man. This was great. Okay, let's talk about movement a little bit, because you know a lot about that. My question is, are you in pain right now?
No, I'm not in pain. But I think though it's really interesting. That's an interesting question, because I think we really have colored pain as good or bad, right? And one of my old good friends, Brian McKenzie, had a shirt a long time ago that said "Pain is my companion," and I view that as pain is an important diagnostic tool. Like, do you consider soreness pain? You know, like, well, I don't know, my quads they hurt to the touch. The real question is, what's the resting state of the human being? The resting state should be pain-free. So if you're having pain, it's definitely a normal part of the human experience, but it tells me, it's giving me information about my body. And some of it I can perceive as threat, and some of it I can't, right? And, if I jump in the ice bath and I feel like I'm dying, is that real pain, or is that uncomfortable? So what's interesting is, for a long time, we really treated pain as a medical problem, and pain is not a medical problem. I think pain is at a person level, is at a coach level, gym level. Injury is definitely a medical problem, and we define injury as if you are in so much pain, or you cannot perform your role in society, you can't perform your role in your family, you can't do your role as a teammate or in your work, or there's a bone sticking out of your leg, then you're injured. And that's a very different conversation. But, I've got some old bad injuries that I'm never going to get around, that happened because of sport and because I was going 100 miles an hour. And, and if I don't manage them, they'll give me some grief, and I have to sort of keep my eye on it. And then as I take my obsessive self, when I'm definitely get obsessive about things, and right now, in about a week or so, I'm going to go on a 250-mile mountain bike ride in the desert with some friends.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing.
So we're supported by a truck, we camp out. You only have to ride like 50 miles a day. It's very reasonable, right? I mean, 50 miles on the mountain bike is not nothing,
right?
But it's day after day after day. And getting ready for that, I'm like, wow, my adductors are so short, and if I don't stay ahead of it, my back will ache. Am I injured? No. Am I in pain? No. But it turns out that when I ride my bike a ton, my calves, wait for it, get really stiff. And if I don't get on them, it hurts when I take a step first thing in the morning, where I'm like, am I old? Do I have foot cancer? No, my calves are stiff because of the biking volume that I've been doing trying to get ready for this thing. So, I think that's the thing. And more importantly, I feel like I have a plan, and I feel like I've been fortunate enough that I come out of a community, and this is the work I do, that if something hurts, I have a way of making it not hurt, and an algorithm to get to the bottom of that. And I don't think we've given that to people. People have become very sophisticated around their sleep and their biometrics tracking, and their nutrition and their training and their movement quality, I'm like, so when you're like, I had a conversation today with a girl at the gym, and I was like, she is a monster. She came to us from fitnessing, and she's like graduated into like being obsessed with, running, biking, and being competent on the barbell. And she's like, man, I'm golfing and I'm hitting the crap out of the ball, but my elbow hurts, she's like, I have golfer's elbow. And I was like, so what'd you do? She's like, rubbed it. And I was like, dude, you've become so competent, and somehow you failed to figure out how to make yourself feel better, or desensitize your body, or improve the environment. And I was like, let me ask you a question. So if your knee hurts, what do you do? She's like, well, my quads might be stiff. And I was like, so what'd you do? She's like, well, I smash on my quads, I'll open up my hips. And I'm like, what happened? She's like, your knee stops hurting. I'm like, so what's below your elbow? And she's like, my forearm. And I was like, and how is that different than your calf? And what's up of the elbow? And she's like, my triceps and biceps. And I was like, and how is that different than your quads and hamstrings? And you could see she hadn't connected the dots, because that is not the things that we value. if my kids have a problem, they'll come home and say, "Dad, you smash my calves, my knee hurts." And I'm like,
Yes.
"All right, all right." And what I'm saying is, it hasn't been part of our conversation the same way movement quality hasn't been a part of our conversation until recently. Nutrition really hasn't been. We haven't been as sophisticated as a strength and conditioning group or nutrition as we are now. And I was still taking weight gainer 900 in high school. That's not very sophisticated. So, I think this conversation about pain is, I'm pretty lucky. I've had I have two huge holes in the bones in my right knee, between my femur and tibia, where I booted out skiing really, really fast. And, sometimes it gets irritated when I ski or jump and land or do kind of crazy stuff, and my knee swells up a little bit. And, what am I going to do? Have a knee replacement? I don't think so. Not yet. So, the idea is that our bodies are these really, really robust systems. In fact, to borrow, Talib again, they're anti-fragile, which means the system doesn't just tolerate changes in the system and perturbation of the system. It actually becomes better from it. Like, exercise is a pretty big stressor on the body, and exercise actually makes you weak. But when we train and get better from training, that's a function of this anti-fragile complexity in the system. That means that when you train, you have an adaptation response to that training, and then the body becomes stronger, right? The body becomes fitter. The body becomes more efficient from that, theoretically, if you're sleeping and eating and right? And not just seeing that as one more stress. And, the point around this is, our bodies, I ideally want to build in as much capacity into your system as I possibly can. We really want people these days, and we see people are eating, I'll put in quotation marks, cleaner than I think I've seen my community eat in a long time. But a sashimi chicken breast and some brown rice and broccoli is a real crappy meal, if I'm being honest. You've hit all your macros, but there's no collagen in there. Can I see your essential fats? Right? You could be macronutrient perfect and micronutrient dense, not dense at all. And when we start to value things like sleep and, appropriate hydration, and you're eating like a human being is supposed to eat, and you're getting some collagen, and you're loading your tissues systematically, then you can actually tolerate a whole lot more crap than if you're not doing those things. And so for me, how do we strip out some of the noxious things, right? For example, most of my friends have all stopped drinking. Juliet and I barely drink anymore, because what we found was that, man, while an ice cold Mexican beer is pretty amazing sometimes, it really messes with the quality of our sleep. Our cardiac function isn't as hard, and maybe it wasn't worth that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so now what we tell our friends is like, well, we only drink when we're really not stressed. So when we're on vacation, we're like, let's have a drink, but when we're stressed animals, we do not drink, because it's just another stressor. And that stressor means that I'm less able to handle throwing a whole bunch of crap at my body, including hard training volumes and et cetera, or just crashing on my mountain bike,
Yeah. That's great, man. One of the things that I love hearing you talk about most, which you just mentioned briefly, was the concept of setting up your environment to make it easier for you to do whatever it is that you want to do. And I've heard you use the example of starting the walking school bus, so you walk your kids to school every day. And Adi and I are actually in the process of moving closer to the city so that we can walk to the gym, we can walk to yoga, we can just spend more time actually moving rather than just spending an hour a day in a concrete gym somewhere. Are there any other changes that people can make in their environment to make taking care of themselves that much easier?
There are there's a lot of good people writing about this sort of thing. For us, I think Juliet and I, I think we were a lot more unreasonable a decade ago. And now, as I've gotten older, I'm like, well, are you sleeping? Do you feel loved? Do you feel safe in your family? Are you, all of those things matter. And I think you really hit on a big one, is that sometimes we're not moving enough. And a piece of research just came out that's all-cause mortality associated with not moving. And so the first thing is, okay, let's get you moving. What does that mean, right? It doesn't have to be I have to walk 10 miles a day. It just means that, hey, I sort of want you in constant motion throughout the day. And believe it or not, what we think is, hey, sedentary people should walk more. And I'm actually like, if you are training really hard, I need you to walk more just so that you can sort of complete the rinse wash cycle. That you need to decongest and move fluids out of your compartments a little bit more than maybe the person who's not redlining it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're at your desk, sitting, smash a workout at lunch, go for sneaking that run, that's fantastic. I mean, kudos to you. Let's keep you moving so that doesn't back up and become a problem in the stiffness of your tissues or your failure to sort of fully adapt to that training stress. So one of the things you're saying is walking and moving more, and there's so many ways to do that. And then and it helps to become aware of it. And fortunately, most of us carry our phones. You don't need an activity tracker. You have a phone. So I go into high schools and I'm like, pull out your phone. So every kid has their phone in their back pocket. And I'm like, how many steps did you get? I'm like, you didn't even know you were being tracked. And they're like, whoa, you open up the iHealth app and there's your steps, and I'm like, that says a lot to me. And people are like, well, it's not perfect. I'm like, it's a relative every single day, and you can see the meta trends. And the second thing is, and believe it or not, check this out. This is so simple and so dumb. I want you to sit on the floor more. And like right now, I'm talking to you while I'm sitting on the floor, and I've adopted about 300 different floor sitting positions. I've been in straddle, I've squatted, I've been sitting cross-legged, I sat in lotus, I sat in 90-90. And you can get a lot of hip range movement stuff done in the background. And what we know for sure is that countries that toilet on the ground and sleep on the ground have less hip disease and lumbar disease, and their elderly fall less.
And their elderly fall less?
They don't fall because you're getting
yeah.
up and down off the ground.
Right.
So it's sort of a Turkish get up all day long, right? I mean, you can do a burpee or you can just get up and down off the ground like a human. And there's actually good study to show that, your ability to get up and down, cross your legs, like kind of crisscross applesauce, and then stand up. And that's a nice test of hip range of motion and balance. And if for every point of contact you need to get up off the ground off of that, a knee down, a hand down, is an indicator that you're likely to die sooner than someone who can get up down off the ground without using their hands. And, there's a great book I'd highly recommend for the super nerds who are listening called Muscles and Meridians. And it's written by a guy named Philip Beach. And it is sort of an integrative book where we're talking about developmental embryology, which is super technical and dry, but it's a way of looking at how humans move and function, even based on our development as embryos and as young, developing organisms, and why like your lips and nipples and genitals are all come out of the Wolffian ridge. And it's not an accident. Those things are all erogenous zones because of the way we develop as human beings, right in the womb. Mm-hmm. Well, part of that then is actually looking at trying to integrate some of the things that we used to do as humans. And we used to do a lot of carrying of resources on our heads, our baskets. We carried animals. So loading the spine is actually something that humans have done since the dawn of time. And that may mean throwing a sandbag on your shoulder and going for a walk, or carrying a backpack like GoRuck, or it doesn't matter how you're squatting, carrying a kettlebell, doing farmer's carries, Dan Johnson, it doesn't matter. It turns out that's a thing humans do. Another thing humans do is they walk a lot. And another thing humans do is they get up and down off the ground. Until recently, we were a ground-based animal, which means we cooked on the ground, we slept on the ground, we toileted on the ground, we hung out in groups on the ground. And if you really want to see the health of a system organization, have a meeting and then have everyone just sit on the ground and watch how uncomfortable people are after like 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I'm like, what do you mean you can't sit on the? You're arguing me about technique around like powerlifting, but you can't sit on the ground? Like, we have some issues here. So, people talk about, we put up a post of me being cross-legged, and the internet broke, like I've never rah. And I was like, dude, sitting cross-legged is one of the shapes human beings sit in. And
What was
the easiest,
what was the issue?
just that people were like, I can't sit like that. And I had, I had one leg stacked. I was leaning forward. And I was,
Yeah.
but people talked about the fact that and I was like, when's the last time you actually sat on the ground?
Mm.
And Philip Beach has a hypothesis that some of these behaviors help tune the animal, and that sitting on the ground is a resting behavior and a resting posture. And one of the things we don't teach are resting restorative postures. We actually have to go to yoga or go to a Peter Goskew class or understand some of our positions of restoration and understand. I want everyone to understand that sitting on the ground is one of the ways that the body tunes itself. And because it's such a complex system, that's where the system optimizes itself. So, as one of the things that you can do, our friends at Veridesk, there's a thing called like the laptop 30 tray. And it's just a tray it's not a big sit to stand desk. It's just a tray that can go on a counter.
Mm-hmm.
But this counter laptop tray, I use as a ground-based desk all the time. And I do a ton of writing on there.
What's it called?
It's called the Laptop 30 by Veridesk. And I'm not on commission, but this thing really gave me context and ability to work on the ground comfortably. So now, for me, sometimes, as you say, how can I get myself, because I'm a busy person and when I have a window to go, I got to go.
Mm-hmm.
But if I have done the warm up with my class, I've walked to school, I've done a little sitting on the ground, right? I've been up and down a whole bunch. Like, I'm primed and ready. So I don't need a long warm up because my hips are open. I've already moved my body a bunch, right? And so when it's time to go, I can go more effectively.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I'm all about finding ways to just make it super simple to move more or just to take care of myself in whatever way possible. And sometimes something as simple as like putting a tool in your face in your environment rather than having it in a shelf, whether, maybe a foam roller or some type of stretching device or anything it might be, just putting it out rather than leaving it hidden makes you using it so much more likely.
You're not the Buddha. Like, give yourself a minute. You're doing, that's why I want to make our environments automatic. So you don't, if the behavior is there, if the environment is already constrained, then it's one less decision I have to make.
Right.
I jumped out of the car. I was at the gym teaching, jumped out of the car, high-fived my wife. And then I immediately was like, oh, I'm going to sit down and get my hips open, because when I get off this, I got to go bike. I got to go for a quick ride. And as soon as I'm off our talk, and what I've been doing this whole time is getting ready for my bike.
I love it.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, man. Anytime. I've got 2 more questions for you, and then we'll get going. What habits or pieces of technology should people be most worried about right now, such as people spending hours on social media every day in a compromised posture?
Well, here's the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. So the way, look, we don't need to fear spinal flexion, right? You don't need to worry about your head coming down. But if those are the shapes you're always in, and they start to cost you your ability to put your arms over your head or take a big breath or use your pelvic floor effectively, then that's a concern, isn't it? When I start to lose capacity from some shape, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if I have a whole bunch of children, for example, who can't do an air squat, who can't long sit, who can't do some basic human physiologic things, then I have to ask, what the heck's going on with that? So, there's never going to be one thing that is the big problem. For us, I think, we're supposed to, look, it's easy to sort of romanticize our Paleolithic selves, right? And, really, in the last few thousand years, we're the same people, but things have changed radically. And I wouldn't want to go back, but I don't think sometimes we realize that those things are impinging on the fundamentals about being a human animal for the past 2.5 million years. So, for example, and this is from, the wonderful book, Deep Nutrition by Kate Shanahan, is that she points out that we probably used to eat 40 to 60 kinds of vegetables, in a year. And if you're a ninja, you maybe eat 20 different kinds of vegetables in a year, and the typical American eats 3 or 4. And, that's not anyone's fault. It's just the mission creep, for lack of a better word, like factory farms didn't just show up overnight for chickens. Like that was sort of how they evolved. And I suspect that we are honestly witnessing the wholesale de-evolution of the human being right now. Big research came out that just said 3 out of 4 Americans are overweight or obese. And we're so overweight that we actually don't even recognize that we're overweight. Like we're like, oh, I'm not overweight. That person's overweight. I'm like, actually, we're all overweight. Like most of us are overweight, 3 out of 4. When you and I went to high school, the chances of us being diabetic as kids, as adults, was 1 in 4,000. Now it's 1 in 4. I'm talking about diabetes. I'm not talking about being overweight, right? And if you're a Latinx male, it's 2 out of 3. And if you're an African American woman, it's 2 out of 3. So what is it about, the sort of insidious creep of behaviors over decades that's getting us there? And I think that's really the tricky part. And even doing good research on human beings is difficult. Why? Because we're complex. This notion of us being complex is that it's hard to do research on animals that live 100 years old to be 100 and live to be 100 pretty easily. So, again, so I think we can go back to some of our movement traditions and we can say, what is it that all of them have in common? We can go back to some of our ancestral eating traditions, and you'll see that in, like, for example, in deep nutrition, that there's a lot of homage paid to how do cultures eat, how long have they eaten that way, and why are they doing that, right? And not that, like, we had it nailed playing the perfect game 60 years ago, but there's that old, like, ate what your grandparents ate, ate what your grandparents ate. And what you'll see is, whoa, how we're living looks pretty radically different around sleep and movement. I think this is a good example that we can talk about, that, we don't, people aren't going in the sun anymore, right? We don't get enough sunshine. We're seeing chronically low vitamin D levels. And, we're all wearing sunscreen. Now we're killing the planet. But, when one of my daughters was born, Caroline was born 6 weeks early, and she was spending some time in the NICU. And when she was being discharged from the hospital, they were like, okay, she was breastfeeding. Juliet's a champ. We're lucky to breastfeed. And they were like, you got to give her these vitamins. And I was like, what? And they were like, no, she's got to have these vitamins. And I was like, I'm going to swear here, you've got to be fucking kidding me. And I was like, you're telling me that breast milk from my wife is not enough nutrition for a human baby? And they were like, and I was like, what is it about Juliet's breast milk that you're concerned about? And they were like, there's no vitamin D in it. White women in this part of the world don't go in the sun. There's no vitamin D in the milk. And I was like, okay, now we're talking again, right?
Right.
And, I was like, so I can put my kid in the sun, or my wife can go in the sun, and then we don't have to give her these fake vitamins. And they were like, that's correct. I was like, note to self. So, understand that we're creating a lot of sort of those level issues around for ourselves, where we're not doing the things that we have always done. And that sometimes backs up into the system. And so when we're looking at what are the best practices for long haul, there's a lot of roads that lead to Rome, certainly a lot of ways to ascend the hill, but you'll see that there are fundamental principles about all those things. And that means, man, you got to be in a tribe. You got to move more as much as you can during the day. You've got to be exposed to some bright sunlight at some point, even for it's 5 minutes. No one gets sun cancer for 5 minutes of sun exposure. You should got to sleep in a dark, cold place, right? You should go to bed. Just all the things that we sort of know, we can really start to sort of codify and make normal and normalize that. That's what we got to do.
On the flip side, are there any movements such as more people using stand-up desks that you're really excited about right now?
Well, remember, clearly we haven't, my wife and I, caveat here is that we have a nonprofit called Stand Up Kids. And we have about 90,000 kids getting out of their sedentary traditional desks, which, by the way, is not normal for kids, right? You got to get outside and play, Johnny. You got to go run, no, you got to sit for 6 hours. What?
Right.
And you have to understand that our traditional education model is a hand-me-down from, and I'm not, this is some big conspiracy. It's okay to be at a desk sometimes, is really hand-me-down from the British hegemony, where we were making,
Wizards.
scribes and people to be able to go, occupy the empire, right? That is our traditional education system. And don't believe me, look at the book Weapons of Mass Instruction. Look at Raising Cain. Boys are getting their butts kicked by girls on all metrics. They're fidgeting more. They get into trouble, yada, 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 right? Like David Epstein's book, The Sports Gene, talks about the fact that we're probably medicating some of our best movers because they're fidgeting and getting in trouble. They have ADD, they get on drugs, they don't fidget, right? So, the bottom line is, is sitting bad? No, of course not. Not moving is bad. And so when we suddenly see the aggregation of a lot of changes in behavior around young people, not walking to school, not playing all afternoon, on tech more, sitting for long more homework, sitting all the time in the car. Suddenly, for us, changing the environment by encouraging movement seemed like a win-win-win. And it turns out it is. In fact, we're engaged and we're trying to raise funds right now for a big 2-year study at Cal Berkeley so we can try to get this thing into the National Institute of Health, because we see this as a really fundamental way to change and help improve the ball around the narrative of the youth, because kids just aren't moving anymore, losing our movement vital signs. Look at what Greg Cook has done with the functional movement screening kids. You're going to see huge movement deficits, not hitting our baselines, not talking about full actualization, but like, whoa, can't do basic things. Suddenly add in the sedentary behavior and obesity, sedentary behavior and diabetes, and you're seeing we're sort of being attacked by a lot of things, including Doritos and Coke, right? So we're going to have to take a multi-pronged approach. But once again, this is something that we can control. Our friends will work on the nutrition side, or other friends will work on the education side. We'll all meet in the middle. Unfortunately, I think we're going to lose some kids in the generation, but we can do better. And if I like to believe that we have thumbs and brains, and I know we can solve this problem. We can.
I love it, brother. I've been hearing about, kind of to go back to the sitting on the floor more. I've been hearing a lot of people talk about it recently, and this is the nail in the coffin. I think I think actually the desk is going to help me do that, because then I can actually get work done while I'm sitting on the floor, taking care of myself.
Yeah, and remember, just the variety is the spice of life. So sit a little bit, sit at your desk a little bit, walk around a little bit, work at your counter a little bit. The same way as I'm like, if you only went in and squatted, I'd be like, great, you're squatting, but you're missing some shapes there. You're missing some capacities, right? And the same thing is true, being crammed these 1990s. Is your spine going to explode? No, but, for me, I think we're thinking about what's possible with the body and capacity and physiology of a human being, right? That's the aspirational side of this, versus how much of this can I get away with before I have pain? That's a really bad conversation. How many little chocolate donuts can I eat before I have a disease state, right? And that's, like, you can eat a little chocolate donut. That's not the limiting factor. Are you eating vegetables and fruits and walking and moving? Dude, knock yourself out after 8 p.m. Have a chocolate donut. But the key here is we have, said, oh, your blood pressure is 120/80, you're healthy. And that's not healthy. That's baseline for unhealthy, right? So are we telling people if you're 119/79, you're super healthy? And I'm like, well, why aren't we talking about the capacity of the human being? So if you can't put your arms over your head, or take a full breath, or pull up on your pelvic floor, or stabilize your spine, or flex to the ground without your feet collapsing, I'm like, hey, let's not ride on our genetic mastery and our incredible incredible tolerant bodies that are able to buffer this crap. Let's instead think about what's possible. And then that's a real conversation to have. So don't think sitting is bad, I'll die. Think, well, sitting may really diminish my capacity as a human being, especially, and if you've read Yuval Harari, you're going to be 100 years old. You're probably going to be 130 years old. So the back half of this conversation is going to become really important. And it's difficult to change.
Oh, man. Love to hear it, brother. What do people need to know about the Ready State? Anything else that you haven't talked about already?
Oh, man, we are so excited. We have the benefit of being in such a vibrant, passionate, enlightened community. I like to believe that everyone gushes about their community this way, but our community of strength conditioning coaches and peoples and moms and dads, they are, when we started this thing, I started teaching my first course back in 2008. So it's been a minute. And, the bar was very low back then. No one, we were the people who used the lacrosse ball for the first time. We really changed a lot of a conversation about what was possible. If you ever mobilize with a band, you're welcome.
Right.
And what's now is that we've leveled up, and as everyone has gotten more sophisticated, which is fantastic, it gives us the chance to reset our base levels, that we can have greater conversations. So the Ready State, one, is about a lot more different integration. Like, the user experience is different, the apps are different. It's going to be a lot easier for you to use this information about programming for your workouts, programming for your sports, recovery at home with, in the evening, if you have pain, you're going to be able to help kind of work through your own pain on the site. You obviously search the old archive. And, what we're thrilled about is that we can, one, serve our sophisticated population better. Two is, but because we've also had so much experience with so many diverse groups and teams and organizations and the military, and, we've figured out what the best way to apply this information is, so that everyone benefits from our experience. And this is a chance for us to hit reset. Also, this is a chance for us to move what we've learned in our high performance environments like the gym and try to get it back into the hands of the rest of the universe, which is really this notion of let's serve our community first. So the Ready State, we're thrilled. The blog is back. We're writing like mad. We can't wait for people to be tickled. And if you're already a Mobility Wad subscriber, you roll right back over. You get all of the new hotness at the same. So it'll feel like you get twice as much for your money. And we really feel like, man, I'm so proud of the team. I'm so proud of what we've done. And I think people are going to find it immensely usable.
Dude, I'm fired up for you, man. And I'm fired up for this whole community. I love it,
We're
dude.
We're going to die. Do not rebrand and relaunch your company, people.
No shit, man. I'm also just always so inspired by your passion for helping others and just for your craft, man. So thank you for this conversation and the impact that you've had on me and so many other people.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And, I really appreciate to talk about some of the nuances of how I feel about my kids and community and how these things integrate. And I don't get to always talk about this stuff. So I love being here and talking to our community about really diverse subjects that I don't normally get to talk about much.
Hell yeah, brother. You have a great day, man. Have a great bike ride.
Thank you. Best to your special lady friend.
Appreciate it, man. Likewise.
This episode is finished, but your training journey continues. Head over to brutestrengthtraining.com/SSW and grab your free pack of 32 accessory workouts that you can incorporate into your training and start improving your strength immediately. That's brutestrengthtraining.com/SSW.